General business is the verification the meeting was properly posted.
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Second on the general business is opportunity for public comment. We are now at that section of our meeting where there is an opportunity for citizens to speak. Each individual will be limited to 5 minutes. We will signal the speaker at 2.5 minutes in order to allow wrap-up of their comments. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language in any manner, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience, and that the area behind the speaker and podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Speakers are here to address the board and not the audience. Our first speaker will be Samuel D'Amico. Thanks,
buddy. Good evening. Tonight I'm here to speak about the signage removal directive by the superintendent, deputy superintendent, an issue that's not just going to go away in our district. Today, January 10th, I was featured in a Waukesha Patch article titled "Signs Supporting Many Student Groups Taken Down at Waukesha Schools." At a January 4th school board meeting, high school student Samuel D'Amico stated that signs were taken down at a West high school. A sign promoting the civil rights of disabled students was removed from a classroom in a Waukesha school following winter break, following a directive from the Waukesha School Administration instructing custodial staff to take down signs it deemed examples of prohibited political activism. At a January 4th school board meeting, high school student Samuel D'Amico stated that signs were taken down at West High School that are clearly protected under state and federal law. If any signs are allowed to be displayed for any approved student group, all signs for all approved groups must be allowed. But at West, signs for the Hispanic Club, Black Student Union, Gay Straight Alliance, and the Equity and Equality Club were removed, which we've heard from at West that it was a miscommunication by the administration, which I would say is still administration's fault. If you're going to tell custodial staff to do something, they do it incorrectly, that is the fault of those who gave the order that probably could have been reworded a little better after the fact. That was, 5-6 days that school was violating state statutes, not a low measure. I think the issue of removing signs that the school district deems political is a very loose term. We removed signage that had nothing to do with politics whatsoever. At South, a sign that was outside of a science classroom said that dreamers are welcome here, which meant students that had dreams. It was not directly correlated, the DACA program, dreamers, etc. It was not directly correlated to that. Administration sent out a directive, political signage. Of course, stuff is going to get misconstrued. A miscommunication on administration's part is not something small, not something that should just be ignored. It is not something that we should just forget. It's probably going to happen again. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you, Sam. Next up is it Christina Baumann? Yes.
I like your plaque up there. It tells me exactly where I'm at. That's great. I'm here tonight to first of all talk about some agenda items. I think you have on your agenda tonight, you're discussing alternative locations possibly for the board meetings. And I'm coming to speak in support of that. On my way here, I drove by the Horizon West condominiums, and as you are aware, there's a raise order for those condos, and that's going to be done in a pretty short timeline. So I really think now would be the time to check into alternative locations and to pursue that a lot further, because you're going to not only have a problem with traffic, parking, that road might be partially closed, and there might be other issues for people getting here. Plus, I think we need a bigger venue because there seems to be a lot of community engagement and a lot of interest in what's going on. And we do have technology, so let's showcase our wonderful resources that we have and show our community and our families what we have. Another thing I want to talk about is Esser funding. Oh my goodness, that is so complicated. I don't know how you guys can do this sometimes, but I was particularly disturbed in relation to that with the enrollment going down. The enrollment has declined since it's actually been going down. I mean, you can see it on this chart. It's in your last meeting. And I'm really concerned about that because that obviously has an impact on funding. And I know you guys are tying the Esser funding with the budget, which I think is great. But my concerns with Esser is I'm wondering, it gave an expenditure breakdown at the last meeting, and there's about 11%, I guess, that are unassigned right now. I'd really like to see that go towards the kids, the students. I'd really like to see us do more showcasing of our charter schools in the district, because a lot of people don't know that we have all that. We know about eAchieve, but unless you're in the district, you don't know that we have, the Health Sciences Academy, that we have STEM, that we have, I don't even know all of them, actually, and I live here. So I think that would be really important. I'm particularly interested in, too, our share of the money is about $17 million over all 3 phases. I'd like to see how much of that, and I'm not sure if I have the right people or not, how much of that, of this money went to non-public schools in the area, because I think you guys are the lead LEA here, the lead educational institution, so you guys would be involved in those discussions. I'd like to see how much money was allocated towards non-public schools and how much did they actually take, because I know there are some schools that aren't taking any. And I'd be interested in that just as a person of the public, because that obviously frees up a little more for us. And then my other thing is...
2 minutes.
I like that, 2 minutes. Sounds like I'm at a... I want to talk about substitute teachers. I'm not sure if this is the right committee meeting or not. It's probably HR also. You guys sent out this great flyer. I love it. It talks about how to become a substitute teacher. I think that's a great idea. The issue I have is pay $130 a day, which I'm guessing is 8 hours, or $65 a half day, which is about 4 hours, which is about $16.25 an hour. I think people that go through any kind of certification, teachers are professionals and substitutes have to go through training and that kind of thing. I think because there is a shortage, and typically in most industries there's reserve or pool positions, and what happens in those cases is that those are unbenefited positions, but they usually get a higher rate of pay. And I'd like to see that for the school district of Waukesha, because I understand that subs are, it's a problem all over. And I think that might help make you guys more competitive. I think you may have raised them once, but it needs to go higher. $16.25 an hour, you can go at a fast food restaurant and almost get a job for that. And then I want to say, why aren't we using more parent volunteers to do things, to free up some of our staff to help to do things? Myself and another person helped to do the book offered to help do those book audits to get things in a system or whatever needed to be done. Not saying that, I don't know a good way to say it. We offered our
30
services,
seconds.
they were declined, and I wish they would have taken this up on us, because I think there's a lot going on and we want to free up staff to be able to do whatever they can. And then just one other comment at the end. We're human and everyone makes mistakes. Everyone. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Christina. Next up is David Wad.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm going to change things up and talk about something I don't think is controversial, or at least shouldn't be, and I think would be supported by a broad range of the people who typically attend these meetings on a regular basis. And that's the issue of the site location for the board meetings. You all have seen me at plenty of these over the last year and a half. It has always been packed to the gills since you allowed people to come back in. We've always had people in at least one, if not more, overflow rooms in this building. There are people who take time out of their busy schedules to come here and engage in the democratic process of participating and watching the people's work being done in person. And oftentimes, more than half of those people wind up sitting in a room and watching on a monitor. And from my perspective, that defeats the purpose of having people come to the building. We have facilities in this district that can house more people. We have the technology to be able to broadcast across YouTube and other platforms. I see basketball games being broadcast. I see plays being broadcast. I know the technology exists. This should be an easy problem to solve, and I frankly don't know why it hasn't taken place before now. But when I start seeing people arriving here 2 hours before a board meeting just to try to get a seat in this room so that they can be present and watching the democratic process play out in person, and knowing that that might mean they had to leave work early, they may not have been able to feed their families before they left, or maybe they just decide not to come because they don't want to fight to wind up sitting in a room upstairs. It's a wet blanket on the democratic process. I don't think it's treating the people of this community fairly that come down here to engage with all of you, to speak their minds when they choose to come up to this podium, or to even just watch the process, to basically shut them out by not having a boardroom big enough for them to sit in. So I really want to encourage you to become aggressive in solving this problem. The board president knows this isn't the first time he's heard from me on this subject. I've been talking about it for going on a year now, I think, in various communications I've had with him, and I think with other members of the board as well. And I think that it would be in the best interests of the community to make sure that the constituents who put you here have the opportunity to watch you work in person, should they choose to, instead of feeling as though it is an imposition
2 minutes.
and not even get a seat in the room. So I would encourage you strongly, and not just for board meetings. I've seen committee meetings where this has happened too, and I would ask that you would project out when there are items that are going to be on your agendas for whether it's facilities and finance or teaching and learning, that you find a location that will be able to accommodate a bigger crowd if you can anticipate one coming. That is, I believe, the appropriate democratic, or an appropriate response to the democratic process that so many of the people in this community have been participating in for a year now, and there isn't going to be a change in that. I think all of us ought to realize by now that the community's engagement with these board meetings at the level it is the new normal. And having 2 or 3 people show up for a board meeting, those days are gone. And we need to adjust as a district, you need to adjust as a board, and get the meetings held in a place where people can participate openly and in the same room with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Is there anyone else that wishes? Moving on to the action items. First action item is the approval of the minutes from the December 6th, 2021 meeting. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Dietz. Is a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Como. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0. Second action item is approval of the vouchers.
There's no questions tonight.
Okay. Be looking for a motion for approval of the vouchers. Mr. Como?
I approve the vouchers as presented.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Dietz. Are there any questions that the committee has? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0. Alrighty, next up is the discussion information items. And the first one is open enrollment space availability for the 2022-2023 school year.
Yeah, thank you. So back in 17-18 school year, a request was made by the board to bring the open enrollment numbers through committee. So we're here tonight at F&F because open enrollment numbers don't fit anywhere very neatly as far as a committee presentation goes. So what you see in front of you tonight is the estimated seats. By state statute, we're required to come to you in January for approval of the seat allocations for the upcoming school year. We have presented it in this format for a number of years now, so the board members are familiar with it. These numbers are the minimum number of seats available at each grade level, so should we have extra space once the school year, as we get closer to the school year, we can always accept more students going into the year. There's a few tables on the sheet here. One talks about our general space availability, both in the monolingual and the dual language available seats. Where you see a 0 as far as space availability, those students will be put on a wait list and then offered a seat at eAchieve. eAchieve is a virtual charter school, therefore it has unlimited enrollment capacity. There's no confines on it due to like brick and mortar space size. So we have unlimited seats available at eAchieve. We also have our special education projections. For any student with a disability that applies to our district, we would put them on a wait list based off of the current district enrollment for students with disabilities. Kids would be put on a wait list and then offered a seat at eAchieve. So here for any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Dr. Cook? Mr. Como?
Yeah, thank you. Joe, do you know, or do you have a breakdown of, and if you don't have that right now, if you could maybe have it for Wednesday, how many students are enrolled in the dual, or how many students currently enrolled in the dual language program are from out of the district? Do we have any?
Yeah, I just had, Mr. Clark sent me an email earlier, just before the meeting got started. We have 74 students who are OE in for dual language, 27 students who OE in for STEM, 14 to WEPA, and 8 to the Engineering Academy.
Okay. Just one of the sentences was a little confusing to me, but now this clarifies it a little bit. So in the third paragraph of your presentation, it says the district dual language programs may be accessed by students who are open enrolled. However, families cannot apply to a program through open enrollment, just the district. So I'm just trying to understand.
Correct. You can only apply through open enrollment to the school district. You can't apply to Banting Elementary School, for instance. You can apply for an elementary seat. You can't apply for a program. You can, express your desire to get into that program. We do everything we can to accommodate, but you have to open enroll to the district for the district seat first.
Okay, gotcha. I appreciate that clarification.
No problem. Similarly, and I just wanted to mention, in years past, we have closed schools to open enrollment. For many years, Whittier and Butler were closed to open enrollment. But due to space availability at those schools, they are open to open enrollment students. They're also open to school choice students within the district. So all of our schools can be accessed by anybody who is in our school district in this coming year, provided there's space in the class, grade, or program.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Joe, how often do we open up seats? So in grade 11, there's no seats available.
Correct.
Do we not have anybody that open enrolls in?
It's very rare that you get kids that are junior, senior level that want to open enroll in. Usually we see open enrollment numbers come in, 8th graders coming in 9th grade. Oftentimes like 5th going into 6th grade. We'll see the large number of out-of-district kids coming in, or in that K4, kindergarten, 1st grade, you see that open enrollment at that time. That's not to say, though, that we don't have move-ins during those same periods, but those are the big open enrollment times.
Okay.
We will track through our enrollment office and through HR, how seats shake out as the summer goes on, which is why the wait list is important.
Okay.
And from time to time, we will go to that wait list and select kids based off of space in the grade level.
Okay. And then for K4, is it still the law that you have to have K4 in your home district in order to move to a different district, or open enroll to a different district?
That is up to the sending district.
Okay.
So if the sending district doesn't have 4K, they could deny the transfer. But we as the receiving district would not be the denying person in that.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Okay. Anything else? Dr. Cook, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, under discussion information items, is the monthly budget report.
In Sherry's absence, I can tell you that we are in compliance with all approved budgets, and there's nothing unusual happening at this point. But if there's any particular questions on the budget line items, I'd be happy to answer those.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, I'm just interested in our healthcare claims. Have we had any surprises, any upticks?
We started off the year with a few high-cost claim that reached stop-loss coverage, but the last report is showing still kind of a slower utilization of health insurance, and I would guess, based on our previous experience with COVID, is COVID's kind of ramped up again, that people are backing off, clinics are not open as much, that we might still see that slowing of claims, but it's hard to tell. And the real driver on the costs globally is how many of those high-cost claims are we going to get in a year. Those normally drive a significant part of our claims. But overall, we're running very good this year as of the end of November, so hopefully that continues.
Sure, and COVID certainly has been a curveball in, whether people are utilizing the clinics and the doctors, and, that there has been a slowdown, so there will be a rebound. It's just when. And you would think there would be a rebound, and that's what we've been waiting for, and we just haven't seen that rebound, in the claims.
Now, at the end of summer into September, claim services that were provided like in August, and the claims didn't hit till September, October, we kind of saw that uptick that we thought we would be seeing, but then there was kind of a slowdown again. So
Yeah.
it's very hard to predict right now.
From a financial perspective, it's good for the district, but, we don't want
In the short term, yeah.
teachers and staff, not getting the attention that they need from a health perspective, because in the long run, I think that will play against us. So we want healthy employees.
I would agree.
Are there any other questions about the monthly budget? All right, seeing none, moving on. Number 3 is the Esser budget.
Yeah, just a quick, actually, I'll share this. Follow-up from our budget workshop, and we shared an Esser presentation that we've been slowly rolling out to different groups to get feedback on. And one question I got a couple of times that I thought I'd try to clarify, not only for the board but for the community. When we talked about Esser and the utilization of funds at the workshop, and I think at F&F even last time, we talked about kind of these big blocks of areas that we would spend the money. And that doesn't mean that we were looking for all-out approval of, I'll just use the HVAC building upgrades as an example, that we would necessarily be asking in one motion for $9 million, so that the approval and the expenditures of those dollars will actually go over several years. And this is just a scenario, numbers I made up just to demonstrate how it would roll out. So each year, the board would approve the annual budget, and that would be either incorporated in it, or we would bring forward a budget amendment if it was after the approval of the final budget. So I'm picturing at least 3 approvals of Esser dollars. Now, again, the presentation that was made, that kind of ties into your comments, that presentation was labeled version 1. There's a lot of conversations that are going to be had over, I think, a 36-month or close to 36-month period. But I just wanted to kind of define how it maps out. And I presented it just as the lump sums, just to kind of get the topic areas out there, because the benefit of the workshop is it's more of an open dialogue and for Q&A from the board. So that was the only thing I wanted to bring forward as some early feedback of questions, and ties into the comments we heard, I think, just a few minutes ago, of the process that we envision going forward as we work through fiscal year 23-24. I don't know if there's any questions on that, but.
Any questions, Mr. Como?
I had a question, but more some comments, and maybe it'll lead to some questions. But, I think it's really important that we remain flexible with this. One, in our workshop, even though we may have some good ideas of where these monies are going to go, there still are many unknowns in terms of the information that we get from the federal government on these and from the state. So not all the information that we have is locked in stone right now. However, we do have a lot of information, at least enough to start to make decisions at this time at a high level. And, as an example, the HVAC work, we have some practicalities with that too. Can we really attack all that in one summer? Answer is probably no. So we do need to divide that across multiple years. The security upgrades, we're also looking at dividing that across multiple years, and the student services. So I hear the comment that the constituent made, Ms. Baumann made, the unassigned, having that go towards the students as much as possible. Now there are some aspects that we went over in our workshop that there are some benefits to putting them in some groups, the way we've put it in some groups to avoid, or to maximize, I guess, how much money we can actually utilize here in our district. So there's more efficient ways of utilizing the money than not. And Darren, I don't know if you can maybe explain some of those efficiencies?
Yeah, each piece of legislation, and there's two that we're primarily looking on, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, has different rules tied to it on what you can spend it on, and ESSER 3 has a 20% minimum that has to be spent on learning recovery and things like of that nature. You also get into the requirement for prevailing wage in some funding and not in using operational dollars. So we need to be flexible in, and I think one of the goals of my presentation was to identify the topic areas, and once we kind of agreed on that framework, then we can go in and slot these expenditures that would allow us to maximize the dollars that we have available. The one thing I would add to my previous comment, and it's the bottom footnote here, that I envision us approving this in annual stages by fiscal year. There's some areas of work, and I'll go back to HVAC, where you might want to approve up front all the design work to happen at the same time. You don't want to re-ramp up all those resources. So there might be some grouping over fiscal years, so I just want to tie myself to that. But I guess the point I'm trying to make in this document is the board has several points of contact on when these expenditures will be budgeted and approved, and it'll be an ongoing conversation. So hopefully I answered your question and clarified my last comment.
So this year, obviously, it would be a budget amendment for anything.
Correct.
And typically, we've had 2 times in the year when.
At least, we usually do it mid-year and then kind of clean up at the end of the year as well.
So do you see anything coming up here in the next month as an amendment?
I think there's a part, the student services, that's usually tied to Joe's department, but what I meant by that descriptor is all TNL, all instructional services, all special services for students rolled into one. There's some teaching and learning materials that I think we would like to get online for fall, and with the lead times where they are, I think us coming forward with approval of that little segment as an example, and that's primarily materials and things of that nature. I think the sooner you get that PO out, the better you're assured of getting things by September 1st, if not way earlier than that. The HVAC equipment, again, is one I would probably come forward if that's an area that we decide to focus on with at least the design work occurring. We're already budding up to where lead times are for equipment, depending on the units, and none of our buildings are the same and all that, but so I do think something's coming, certainly on the TNL. I don't know if you would agree with that, but based on my conversations with Jody, those materials, I think she's hoping to get midsummer or so, and then there's staff development, I'm sure, that goes along with all of that. So I can't think of anything else off the top of my head right now.
So maybe those two budget amendments would come forth in February?
I think I'd bring them in February for consideration. I'd agendize them as action, and then the board would have to decide, if there's more questions, then we could come back in March if we had to. But I foresee at least the TNL stuff coming back in February,
Okay.
at least for an initial conversation.
Anything, Mr. Dietz? Yes, Mr. Dietz.
I know, Mr. Clark, I know as board members, we've had the opportunity to weigh in on our thoughts and input regarding ESSER funds. It's my understanding, too, that there's something on our district website that allows parents to look at this information as well as offer input. Could you further explain some of that and maybe redirect people that aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, the information is, if you go under departments and then the business office, we have an ESSER tab. So that information, we share slide decks that we've shared with the board, and everywhere we've presented so far, I think this is 3 or 4 groups in, there's been slight changes, but basically it's the same presentation over and over. But also there's an email address we set up just for community feedback, and it's esser@waukesha.k12.wi.us. It's at the end of the power slide deck. And then, my phone number's on my business services page as well, my direct line, so if people want to just reach out to me directly, that's fine. So we're trying to share that information. Will be, I think, our next meeting in terms of the school community being shown, the slide deck that it stands now is at Dr. Siebert's Parental Advisory Committee, and that's a rep from every building in the district. So it'd be a broader audience on top of the staff advisory committee, and it seems like we have a couple other committees I can't remember. But hopefully that feedback loop's out there and people feel comfortable reaching out to us.
Good, thank you.
Tyrion, are we planning on spending money out of the ESSER this fiscal year according to this budget? I know it's a sample budget, and you have 2 entries, but, the year is half over. Are we planning on spending?
Again, these
Right, no, for sure, but I was
these
just
numbers
wondering.
are just showing that it can happen in each fiscal
Okay.
year. But I do think that the teaching and learning material would be the one,
Okay,
because otherwise, if you don't do it now,
right,
it's another year you're adding,
you'll be out.
or 18 months from now. So that'd be the one for sure that we would roll back out. If HVAC, if it's not looking like we can even pull off any installs, I might hold off and, depending on how it falls, maybe come back at the end of the year for a budget amendment and try to get it in the current fiscal year. Otherwise,
Okay.
we'll just roll it into next year.
So something that happens next year, we can still move and put in this fiscal year? Like the
At
textbooks?
that point, it would go into next year.
Okay, but would the textbooks as well, or whatever we need for TNL?
As long as we receive them before June 30th, we would.
Oh, we would have to receive them by June 30th, okay. Excellent. Alrighty, anything else? Alrighty, thank you, Mr. Clark. Moving on, our next item is board meeting location. Who's got that one?
That's me.
Okay.
There we go. Just, I guess, follow up on our citizens' comments are tying well with the agenda here. So we've had a few requests from board members and citizens about that topic of a larger venue for the boardroom. I've had some conversations with a few board members on, what are we looking to do? What are we looking to accomplish? And I do think the overall concern, and it was spoken earlier, is those large attendance nights and the use of the overflow rooms. Is that the platform that we're looking to have? I do think that's been improved somewhat. You don't have the 5-second delay that we used to, but I don't know if we consider that ideal. And maybe we're to the point where, as was mentioned earlier, the board meetings, we haven't had 3 people just sitting in the audience in a long time. So I did ask, and TNL had talked about this in the summer, I think July. I didn't go back and review that meeting or anything, but just trying to gauge, if this committee, because to me it's a facilities question, I asked Steve Schloman what the cost would be to create, a rough estimate of a mobile broadcast setup, and it's just under $19,000 was his estimate. So I don't know if the committee wants me to pursue options to have an alternative site, or maybe it becomes our permanent site. We can maybe make that decision later on, or not. Or if there's any particular goals or questions that you have that you want me to provide you answers to as we kind of review this, and we can report back next month on the specifics.
Anything? Mr. Coleman?
What does the 19,000 include? Is that the equipment? Does that get us the broadcast capability, the live streaming?
Yeah, it's the camera, microphones, a mixer, tripod, laptop. He doesn't mention, I'm assuming the network's everywhere, so we can tie in. So it's more the hardware, like you're seeing here.
So so it would be mobile equipment, so we could move from site to site, or would it be 19 grand per site, or?
He says that this would be a mobile broadcast setup that would be set up at a remote location. So I take that as you could rotate around if you chose to.
So way back in the day, many moons ago, we used to do this. We used to have a rotation, like every other month. We'd go out to a different school, and as a board, we could tour that school and meet with the parents and that sort of thing. I thought there was great benefit in that. As budgets tightened and, we, over the years, we just opted to meet here, more from a dollars perspective. Do you know what did Steve give you any indication as to if we needed additional personnel? Because I'm assuming we would need more than one operator to do this.
He didn't mention that, but I can add that.
Set up. And I'm thinking, maybe this is more appropriate for, really what's driving this is public comment, is what's driving this. So hearing from our constituents. Tonight we have, this room is adequate. So I guess, is there a difference between committee and board meetings? And, are we able to predict when we're going to have large audiences or not? That would be the trick. I don't know if we want to have committee meetings always being off-site here, because there are some, I would assume that there are some other administrative expenses potentially associated with moving this off-site, or not. I don't know. I'm asking the question.
I think that's a fair, just the setup alone, just eyeballing that, there's time involved with that. If you're moving it continuously, there's got to be costs built into that we're not incurring by staying at one standard location. Now, is it significantly moving the needle in terms of our cost structure? No, but there has to be some number that we could try to identify or estimate tied with moving meetings.
Yeah, and this might not seem like a large dollar amount, okay? But every dollar does count. And, we're looking at an over $3 million structural deficit every year that we need to close the gap on. How do we do that? Okay? So, and I'm not saying that it's not worth it, but I would like to know what that amount looks like.
Sure.
It is important to hear from our constituents. And it is important for them to, but to be part of that process. And we are making ourselves available from a board perspective, from emails and calls. And so there's more input to the board than just the public comment. There's multiple ways that people can reach out to board members in our district.
or anything? Mr. Dietz?
I guess from my experience and from what I've seen over the last year and a half, I'm just really fully supportive of looking at a new space for our meetings. Not only what our speaker said tonight, I think they covered almost every issue. I think they did a great job. We've heard it before. I think it is part of the democratic process, and I think we should allow those that want to be a part of this meeting to actually be in the same room and same group. So I'm in full support of looking at a new venue for our board meetings. I look forward to us as a committee getting some more information, looking at possible site or sites, and having everyone back in one group. That division never felt right to me. It almost creates a division, I think, and it's certainly not the intent, but like one of our speakers said, I don't see public interest and public input going away in the next few years, and bottom line is I don't see that as a bad thing. So I'm in support and in favor of moving forward at looking at alternatives for this particular room to hold our meetings.
So Darren, do we have anything set up in the district elsewhere that could accommodate it without buying the equipment? So for instance, say we're going to hold our board meetings at West. Does West have the ability to broadcast?
Yeah, I asked Steve to start developing just a list of what facilities, first of all, what facilities would kind of have the infrastructure there for us, but that we could also easily schedule into.
Yep.
Please tell me you don't want gym space or something, because that would be battle.
Yeah. With the new software.
So he's working on a list, and I envision us just coming back with some recommendations of sites that we think, and then outlining like structural benefits to one over the other.
Right. I mean, yeah, I remember when we used to visit sites. I mean, we even went to the Retzer Nature Center, to the planetarium. And I don't really have an issue going to a different site. I just don't want to have to buy equipment to move to different sites. I think we should find one site that can accommodate our board meetings, and investigate what we need to move that. What's it going to cost just for stationary equipment as opposed to mobile equipment? Do those venues, does South have it, does West have it, does North have it, the ability to broadcast where we don't have to buy anything? I think those are some questions. I don't think anybody on a board is going to have an issue with going to a different school necessarily to hold our board meetings. But like Mr. Como was saying, we have to make sure that it's a fiscal responsible decision that we're making. So we've done it before. Most of the people on the board have been to different sites. So I'd like a couple of those questions answered. Can we just go to a site right now that has, and we don't have to purchase a lot of the equipment? So
I would agree with you. My experience with board meetings in a previous life was when you moved them every month, you had community members going to every building that's been a meeting for the last 6 months. So I think identifying a place, not that you could never go somewhere else, but I think there's some value in that consistency. I don't know if you need that as much on the committee levels, but
no, I would agree. I mean,
it's time to look at the agenda, you look at the items, you don't look at where I'm supposed to go when I've been going there for 4 months straight.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, I would agree. When you change the location, and even when we change times on some of our committee meetings, people don't look at the time. They just think it's this time, and they show up at that time, and
that's community
meeting's
members,
over because
board
it was
members,
agendized.
Administrators,
Yes,
all may fall for that.
No, for sure, definitely. Yeah, people who are doing it. So, yeah, I think we should investigate that, whether it's just, if we are going to move, it should just be, I think, in my opinion, is one location, so we don't have that logistical issue of switching locations and have people lost in the shuffle. Mr. Como.
Yeah, I would think that would be a better route to go, and for another reason. So back in the day, when we used to do the traveling, it was great to get out and again, meet people at that site. However, the broadcast, just because the equipment is mobile, doesn't mean you're going to get this quality of the broadcast. You will need to be prepared to have it not be this quality of the broadcast. So if we're going to do this, let's do it right. Is 19 grand really going to cover it? Or do we need to have 50 grand to make this a high-quality meeting? Okay? So I think the worst thing we could do is just say, yeah, let's go to a bigger venue, but you can't hear anything that we're saying.
Right.
That would be,
Right. Like you're speaking in an echo chamber.
that just wouldn't be good.
And that would be constant with the mobile setup. You would,
Right.
you would never catch up with the quality we have in here.
Right.
I don't think, and I'm not an expert in this equipment, but let's just say our past experience has been the mobile equipment isn't very good.
What I'll do to kind of walk us through that point, because I think it's a good one, is maybe prioritize the best locations, and then the associated cost with,
Right.
maybe West High School isn't the best because they're far out on one side of town.
Right.
For
Or maybe south is-
logistical reasons.
Right.
And, so maybe we'll try to prioritize them ourselves, just to frame the conversation, and then guesstimate what the estimated costs of each. And we wouldn't necessarily have to be there in 1 year, cost-wise, as long as people understand, we're moving, but
Right.
your telecast might not be as crisp as it is now, but.
Okay. All right. So we got some questions need to be answered. Okay. Anything else on the locations? Alrighty, that's our last item for the discussion information items. Next up is other business. Is there any recommendations for future committee meetings? Mr. Dietz.
Yeah, I have one. On August 30th, 2021, our Board of Education voted to go back to the Seamless Summer Option, or the SSO program, which provides free breakfast and free lunch for all of our students. At that meeting, we also requested community and local agency involvement to get rid of the peanut butter or cheese sandwich stigma for our students unable to pay for lunch, as well as to explore various ways to enhance our existing food service. It is my understanding to date that 8 of our schools are still not receiving the free breakfast program. These schools include Meadowbrook Elementary School, Summit View Elementary School, Bethesda Elementary School, Rose Glen Elementary School, Hillcrest Elementary School, Prairie Elementary School, Randall STEM Elementary School, and Saratoga STEM Middle School. And unless I'm wrong, administration could correct me on that. At our February Finance and Facilities Committee meeting, I'm asking that the SSO program be put on the agenda as a discussion information item. I want administration to provide an update on, number 1, the work of our community and local agency volunteers up to this time. Number 2, why 8 of our schools are still not receiving the breakfast program. And 3, an estimate of the lost revenue from these 8 schools not receiving free breakfast for the 2020-2021, 2021-2022 school years. On several occasions since October of 2021, I've tried to work through the chain of command with administration, especially with the breakfast program not being served in 8 of our schools. To date, there have been no actions on the part of administration. I now bring this item to be placed on the Finance and Facility agenda for February to allow us as a committee to discuss and ask questions regarding this particular topic, the SSO program.
Ready? You got that turn?
Mhm.
Okay. Ready. We will agendize that at the next meeting under discussion information items. Thank you, Mr. Dietz. Is there anything else? All right. That being said, meeting is adjourned.